Hey everyone, this is Mason Hutchison, and you're listening to HerbRally, your daily herbal podcast. We come out with new episodes about 5 days a week, so be sure to tune in often. Our goal for the show is to help you along your herbalist journey, no matter what stage you're at. We have over 649 episodes, so feel free to peruse those episodes, and you're bound to find something of interest. This episode is with Locust Farm's Amanda Crooke, and we chat about ritual and smoke, her forest story, lesser celandine and existential despair, balancing the moon with the sun, her love of beverages, and a whole lot more. So I've had a lot of back and forth emails with Amanda over the years, so it was nice to actually get to know her a little bit more, learn more about her story and her herbal practice. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. It was a lot of fun for me. You can learn more about Amanda at locustlightfarm.com. And she's not really on the Instagram, so if you want to keep up to date with her, definitely sign up for her newsletter. So again, that's locustlightfarm.com. Also, before we get into the show, we received a new Apple Podcasts written review. This is left by HerbALee. I see what you did there, HerbALee. So seriously, thank you so much for taking the time to write this. The reviews are super duper appreciated and very helpful, but also, yeah, this definitely brought a smile to my face as well. So HerbALee wrote, "Herbalism Connection. I believe this podcast is generated with true passion for our beloved wild, varied, and growing herbal community. Mason is down to earth in his approach and is really hitting a cool stride and vibe with the Herbalist Hour episodes, which I love. I have been meaning to write this review for some time now, and after the last few episodes, could no longer put it off. So grateful for the amazing content and connection." Seriously, thank you so much again, HerbALee. And it's really nice to know that you're enjoying the Herbalist Hour episodes. I have noticed that in the past, sometimes there was like an echo on my end, so I'm now recording these in the basement closet, if you will, with some foam padding and blankets around. But that's all to say, the intent is to continuously improve the podcast, both with my interviewing style and skill, along with hopefully better and better sound. And yeah, I'll just keep on bringing on amazing guests and learning their stories. And yeah, just really trying to hone in on what we're trying to do here. So the Herbalist Hour has been super rewarding for me, and I'm glad to intersperse it in between the other just kind of more normal HerbRally episodes, like say the herbalism lectures and whatnot. But yeah, a lot of the content really has been the Herbalist Hour lately. That's just because I keep interviewing more and more herbalists. There's actually a lot of other types of episodes that I'm looking forward to publishing as well. So if you, dear listener, have a moment, please go ahead and leave us some sort of written review in Apple Podcasts or your podcast player of choice. Really makes my day. Also, I wanted to shout out Torin Frost again. Torin is the Northwest-based rapper who did the intro music for the Herbalist Hour. You could follow him at Torin Frost on Instagram. He's on, I want to say, SoundCloud as well. And I know he has at least got one or two songs on Spotify as well. So, but yeah, definitely give him a follow at Torin Frost on Instagram. He wrote the raps, he performed the raps, he even made the beat. He really knocked it out of the park, and I really appreciate him making the beat for the Herbalist Hour. And last but not least, I want to say a huge thank you to our HerbRally Schoolhouse members. One of the perks of being an HerbRally Schoolhouse member is they actually get to potentially join in live on these Zoom calls where I'm interviewing the herbalists for the Herbalist Hour. And some people have even taken advantage of that. So it's always fun when a member is able to join us in the Zoom call, and they can interact and ask questions and whatnot. So if you'd like to learn more about becoming an HerbRally Schoolhouse member, you could go to herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And don't forget to use coupon code podcast at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. And then it's only $10 a month after that. And yeah, the support from our members really means a lot to us. So huge thanks to our HerbRally Schoolhouse members. And that's going to do it with my rambling. Here is the intro song performed by Torin Frost. Talk to you later.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm joined by Amanda Crooke and Althaea Crooke, presumably. Amanda owns and operates Locust Farm, so welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Of course, yeah. I didn't know that I was getting a two guests today, so that's pretty sweet, pretty special. So
surprise baby guest.
Yeah. We love babies around here. So I'm curious what your herbal origin story is. Like, how did you get interested in herbalism, and kind of like as a child, were you into herbs and so on?
I would say as a child, I was definitely into potions. I'm from my mother's parents were dairy farmers. So I'm from more of an animal husbandry background. And I think the first plant that I used medicinally was plantain leaf, which where I grew up, we called plantain leaf. And so my mom taught us to use plantain for wound healing. So I remember, when I was like maybe 6 or 7, we had given my dog like a T-bone steak for her birthday. And later I sliced my foot on the bone. And, going outside and making a spit poultice and using that. I used plantain a lot as a kid. And then my sister, so for context here, I became an herbalist and my sister became a veterinarian. And my sister and I, we spent so much time on my grandparents' dairy farms, and we would make healing potions for the cows. So we would mix their food. It's called TMR. We would mix their TMR food with water and like chop up dandelions. We would chop up the flower heads because we knew dandelion was good for you, but we didn't understand that it was the leaf. And then we would wrap them in plantain leaf little burritos and feed them to the cows and try and track and see if those cows looked healthier. So that was the first time I think I used plants medicinally. And then when I was in college, the summer after my freshman year, I was working on a veggie farm. And someone there taught me how to harvest nettles. And she was teaching me how to harvest nettles for cramps. But then I realized that on the days when I drank nettles, I did not sneeze. I used to have terrible indoor allergies, like very bad allergies to mold and dust. So high school and college were just disgusting times for me. And so like going a day without sneezing was a really big deal for me. And so that's when I started reading everything I could about nettles, and that really kicked it off.
Yeah. So then I assume you ended up getting so into it that you decided to go to, say, some herb school. Who were some of your early herbal mentors?
So my first official herbal teacher was Lupo Passero of Twin Star Herbal Education in Connecticut. I did a foundational program with her and loved it. And at the time, I live right along the Delaware River, kind of in the Delaware River corridor, between Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So I just moved back and forth across the river. So I actually traveled and I was a full-time organic veggie farmer at the time. And wow. I would drive up to Connecticut once a month. It was a 3-hour drive to go to that program with her, because that was at the time the only program I could find that was a foundational program that also had hands-on components. And, that was like within reason of driving for me, where I didn't have to kind of uproot my whole life and move somewhere. So Lupo was my first teacher. And after that, I did a shamanic apprenticeship program with a local shaman named Cristobal Foster. I've taken some of Tammy Sweet's classes, and then eventually I did David Winston's 2-year program and then his grad program.
Wow. So are you a clinical herbalist?
Yes, I am. I would say I have a very, very small clinical practice. Okay. It's not something I have tried to make a big part of what I do. I think mostly, my goal is to be available to be the clinical herbalist to people who are already in the Locust Light community. Yeah. My goal is always to work outside. And as much as I like clinical herbalism, it is not an outdoor job. So I'd like to be available to be the herbalist for people who are involved with Locust Light. But I haven't necessarily tried to make that a bigger part of what I do.
I was going to ask you what Locust Light meant, but it sounds like that's an area.
So Locust Light has so far been on 2 properties, and I'm currently looking for the 3rd property, which will be the Forever property.
Okay.
So I started my business in 2015 on the Pennsylvania side of the river.
Yeah.
And I was able to find a property that I was able to lease. And it's actually it's hard to name a farm business. So I started Locust Light strictly as a farm. I had an herbal CSA and I was growing wholesale herbs. And I did that for 2 years before I started teaching classes and shifted my focus towards teaching classes. It's hard to name a farm business. And so I decided to, because you could name the farm business based on the location, you could name it based on what the farm does. And I decided that I wanted to have a name that was inspired by the land that it was on. So I was just I was thinking about what I knew about the property. And so this particular property, so I had been a veggie farmer in the area for 2 years. And this particular piece of land that I was able to lease to grow herbs on, I used to drive past it all the time. And I actually loved it because in the summer, the fields were just filled with lightning bugs. So I would drive past it and pull over sometimes. It's always a little creepy to pull over on the side of the road and stare at someone's property. But the times I had the courage to do that, I would just pull over and watch the lightning bugs for a few minutes. And so that was something that I knew about the land. And then when I was doing kind of a walkthrough of the property with the owner, I was just listening for anything he might say that might spark something. And we walked through the forest. And as we were leaving the forest, he said, "Yeah, these woods are filled with locust trees. And my dad always said nothing could kill those." And then the name Locust Light just came into my head, and that's what stuck.
So tell me more about the work that Locust Light Farm does, because I envision, you were telling me pre-call that you guys, you grow vegetables and whatnot, but is it also an herb farm? But then I know primarily how I know you is through your educational opportunities. So can you tell us what more of the work that Locust Light Farm is all about?
Yes. So currently I'm only teaching.
Okay.
So I currently don't have a property at all. So my husband is a vegetable farmer. He
Gotcha.
has a separate business.
I see.
Yeah. And he also leases land. So right now I teach classes in person. I have a classroom space and we go in the woods for our plant time. And then I also teach classes online. Soon, hopefully I will buy property and then Locust Light will go back to being what it really is at its heart, which is a farm and education space. So at the former property, I had a teaching garden. So I grew plants in the garden. We had herbal gardening classes in the garden, and all the herbalism classes were based in the garden. So for classes, during the growing season, we're out there, we're harvesting. We had shamanic circles in the garden. And then I would harvest enough and dry enough so that the classes in winter used herbs from the garden. And then on weekends, I also had the garden open for medicinal pick your own. So people could come to the garden and pick fresh herbs and pay for them by donation. And that is something that all of those things I would like to do more of. I want to have the garden open for medicinal pick your own for more hours, more days, so that more people can come and just, more education in the garden. Because, I think, and I obviously teach online classes. I think online classes can be amazing. But it's hard to find herbalism classes where you actually can meet the plants in person and interact with the plants in person. And, so that's, my goal is just to have a garden space that can be available for that.
I love that. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, you wrote a blog post recently on lesser celandine. Okay. And I was just wondering if you lesser celandine and existential despair, and I was wondering if you would be willing to kind of share what conclusions you came through with the HerbRally audience.
Yeah, I am a person who experiences a lot of existential despair. I think I'm someone who I'm constantly coaching myself through questions of, is it okay that I exist? And how do I, create philosophies in my head and remember to subscribe to philosophies that make it okay to exist? And I think that lesser celandine, I think, can encapsulate that really well because, so I live in the mid-Atlantic in a temperate climate, and it really is just it's just the perfect metaphor, right? Because things will be very gray and, different shades of gray and brown all winter. Mm-hmm. And then now we have this very invasive plant called lesser celandine, which is this bright yellow flower. And it is now the first thing to appear in the spring. And so, and I am a winter baby through and through. So I love winter. Nonetheless, when you have the first pop of color in the spring, it's a big deal. And you see that color and your heart feels gladness. You feel that sense of delight, that sense of expansion. Color is here, it's spring. And you can feel that for about half a second. And then immediately you think, this is an invasive plant. It is not interacting with any of the insects. It's not providing food for any insects. And every single place that lesser celandine is, a native plant is not. Right. So where I live, again, we have this class of plants called spring ephemerals, which live their entire life cycle in the spring. So they leaf out, they bloom, they pollinate, they reproduce however they're doing that, and then they die back, all before the heat of the summer comes in, all before the trees leaf out and the woody perennials leaf out. And these plants are precious. They are unique. They are important for our ecosystem. They have important roles. They're larval hosts. They're providing pollen. They're really keeping the insects alive, and the insects keep everyone else alive. And everywhere that lesser celandine is, a spring ephemeral is not. And so every year there's less and less Dutchman's breeches, spring beauties, rue anemones, bloodroot, everything, all these like beautiful, extraordinary plants. So I think that lesser celandine really encapsulates kind of the existential despair of living in this like very globalized time where there is something that might make you feel delight for a moment. Mm-hmm. And then your mind goes through and thinks about all of the ways that thing is actually exceedingly harmful, whether that thing might be like our amazing access to hot water, or the fact that we can have, I always think, man, it's like we can have chocolate, vanilla, coffee, and beer all in one meal. I mean, like, how crazy is that? And then you can take a hot shower afterwards. It's really out of control. It's amazing. And I feel like a lot of people feel that similar kind of tension of despair between joy and despair. And I would say a conclusion that I came to for myself, because in moments when I feel very low about this, I just think, well, I don't genuinely have a sense of hope. I don't necessarily think things will be okay or get any better. And so then what I think is, okay, the point of existence isn't for anything to get better. It's to have an experience. And so we just need to focus on, which isn't to say it's by all means not to say don't try. But I think that most people who are really feeling the pain of this are already trying, but that doesn't make the pain less. So then I think we need to focus on how to find joy in the moment, and how to just focus on, what we are learning, and not try and think that there's a moment when we're going to like somehow make the lesser celandine go away. We're thinking, I think of it like zooming in and zooming out. So we're like zooming in to find the joy that we can find in the moment. And then we're zooming out to think, okay, well, this feels despairing at this moment. We can see the immediate effects of the lesser celandine. But we don't need to assume that we know everything, or that we are necessarily. I think that's another thing, is like we can over ascribe agency to humans and under ascribe it to the other beings at work. And while again, surely I know that certain groups of humans, of which I'm part, have caused extensive harm, that doesn't mean that other creatures don't have agency, and we don't always know the real big picture.
When you say we're here to have an experience, is that informed from any sort of like spiritual background of yours, or like where did you come to that conclusion?
That's a good question. I would say it is definitely formed from my spiritual background. But I think it would be hard to necessarily point to one specific thing. I think I'm definitely someone who needs to kind of spend a lot of time in spiritual contemplation in order to just, I don't know, keep going on,
I totally know what you mean. I spent a large portion of my late teens, early 20s constantly searching, constantly trying different religions. I was raised in a atheist home, aka there's no any sort of like spiritual background. So I was constantly, and I was always very spiritual myself. I remember praying when I was like 2, 3 years old, you know what I mean, to something, some sort of higher power. And so yeah, I've spent a lot of my life trying to like figure things out. I feel like at this stage of my life, I'm a lot more like chill about the whole thing, but I sure as shit don't have any sort of answers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm definitely, like you said, we are trying our best, right? And yeah, that's all we can do. And it's a very bizarre world that we live in, like trying to like make money and survive as, like people and provide for our families. And it's like at the same token, we're destroying the planet and everything. So that's very tough to balance. But I read that blog post of yours and I thought that would be a really great talking point. I would love to hear you expound upon that more. So thank you.
Yeah. I will say that I think it's something that the thing that has helped me most when I've been very low, I think I might have mentioned this in the blog post, was I was listening. My husband, John, really forced me to listen to this BBC adaptation of Lord of the Rings. And there was this moment where, I know I'm paraphrasing here, but like Aragorn is about to lead this group of people through some horrible death forest. And someone says, there's no hope. And then he says, then we shall go on without hope. And I thought, oh, like we can keep going on and putting one foot in front of the other and doing the best we can, but it doesn't need to be driven by hope. It can be just driven by the fact that we've got a job to do and we're going to do our best to do it.
Yeah. And like, what am I going to do? Ignore my soul, or at least what my heart is telling me to do? Like, I feel like I'm doing my heart or my soul's work anyways. So yeah, I notice I'm the most, say, depressed when I'm not actually following my heart. Like when I start to just veer off from like what I feel like my heart's telling me to do, that's when I start to get the most sad and depressed. I want to do this work because I feel like I'm being told to do this by my spirit, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said you're a big fan of the winter. I'm guessing you like the darkness. You also wrote something last year about your relationship to the sun, specifically being told by some spiritual teacher of yours that you should go see the sunrise. And I just was curious if you'd be willing to talk about that as well. I thought that was really interesting how you said you've been more drawn to, say, like the moon, and that's affiliated with more of like the witchy side. By the way, I got my Witch's Brew mug today in honor of talking to you. But I was just wondering if you could talk about your relationship with the sun, that time that the spiritual teacher told you to go look at the sunrise, and then talk about like the balance between solar energy and moon energy.
Yeah. I think the people who work, I think at least a lot of people I've come across who are like work in the herbal communities or, in the witchy world and just generally like more spiritual communities tend to be so in love with the moon. And there's so often this emphasis on like lunar magic, dream work, the mysterious depths of the waters. And also the moon tends to be connected to the concept of the divine feminine. And I think that in a lot of spiritual circles, there's been this like reclaiming of the divine feminine, which again tends to be connected to the moon. And so there's just such a heavy moon emphasis, and which I get, because I think in a lot of ways, if one say is like connecting the moon to the divine feminine, then the idea is that the sun would be connected to the divine masculine, and or just like this more rational approach, which has gone pretty far in one direction, maybe perhaps too far in one direction. So I understand that. I've always been more of a night person. Like I love being awake at night. I love writing after night. Like I spent so much time in my teens and 20s just like reading and writing poetry by candlelight in the wee hours of the morning. And I've never been a person who likes waking up early. I think for me, waking up 2 hours after dawn is ideal. And times when I've had to wake up earlier than that to do farmers markets or farm things, like I'm just a very cranky, miserable person. So, so I had this assignment at some point, which was to see a sunrise. And then there was like a certain incantation, and I don't remember that part, but I just remember like trying to see the sunrise. I realized like I didn't even know how to see a sunrise. It took me, I think, 3 tries to actually see a sunrise, because, you have to figure out where you can see the sunrise. And then you have to, I was looking up what time sunrise is, but that is the time that the sun is finished rising. And I didn't even realize that. So it just started to feel a little funny to me that like, I didn't even know how to see a sunrise, let alone, did I want to see the sunrise? But that really made me think a lot, like, why is this activity so confronting for me? And I was just thinking, like, I don't even remember what conclusions I drew at the time, but now some of my conclusions are like, I think a lot of people, I think that it's easy to get too focused maybe on lunar energy, and that, it's also very helpful to connect with the specific type of power and strength that can come with solar energy, and, our ability to communicate with the world and with other people. And, I think that it's helpful for getting shit done, really, and expressing and sharing yourself. And so I think, especially for people who are more in like the herbal and spiritual worlds, who have small businesses, or who are trying to kind of interface with the world around you, connecting to solar energy can actually be really, really helpful.
I love that. Yeah, it was a really great blog post. Before I met my Amanda, she always was very into the moon energy. And I remember she had this one thing that she said. She's like, oh shit, I'm going to butcher this. It was something about like the moon seeking her son or something like that. And I was like, this was before I got together with her. I was like, oh, I want to be her son. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the whole idea of balance. I'm a Libra, if that means anything. But yeah, well, thank you for sharing. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit. I'd love to hear more about the Forest Story project that you're working on.
Yeah. So I love fiction. I love stories and storytelling. I love reading fiction. And I've also really over the years become a big believer that fiction is just like it's a great way to deliver concepts and education. I think we really learn well by stories. And I personally enjoy writing. And so, if we're talking about existential despair and trying to do something helpful, I think for me, in addition to working with plants generally, one of the things that I'm always wanting to convey to people is that we need to keep the insects alive. And, and that is why it's important to grow, or just simply allow to live, native plants that have relationships with insects. Like it's an emergency, truly. We need plants that are larval hosts. We need to let goldenrod and asters and monardas thrive, and I guess, and I'm also always, I'm always thinking about the gnomes, and I'm always thinking about the fairies, and I'm always looking for the gnomes and fairies and imagining them living. And so somewhere along the way, I feel like sometimes when something is very true to you, to like your heart's purpose, if you will, it can be hard to remember how something even gets started. So I don't even remember fully how the idea for this came about, but last year I wrote a choose your own adventure story that's delivered via email called The Forest Story. And it is basically diving into forest ecology via gnomes and fairies. And You know what? Okay, this is where the idea got started. This is where the idea started. I realized that people who are involved with Locust Light, above all, the one thing that most people involved with Locust Light have in common is what I call the cabin in the woods fantasy. Where it's either it might be a cabin in the woods, it might be a cottage in the meadow, it might be a cottage on the beach, but it's this fantasy of having a cottage in the middle of nature somewhere where you're not disturbed and you're foraging and you're making your potions and you're drinking your teas and you're gardening. And so many people I know have that fantasy. And so this is how this started, remembering now. I had this idea of, okay, I cannot provide that fantasy to my students, but I can provide it through a story. So the forest story started out as a way, because I think we also have this desire, this is a whole other topic, but I think many of us have this desire for elders, right? For an herbal elder that you could apprentice with, who will teach you their ways and who will be loving but firm with you, make you feel seen, impart wisdom. And that is very hard to come by, like we don't really live in a society anymore, or at least I don't personally know anyone who's able to have a one-on-one apprenticeship with, the wise elder of the forest. So again, I wanted to provide that. So I created this story that I started writing in second person, where one day you get lost in the woods and you stumble upon a cabin and there's someone there waiting for you. And that was how it developed. And then it developed into this really adventure where you're learning about the mycorrhizal network and you're learning about larval host relationships. You're learning about responsible foraging and all that. Again, through this whole cast of characters of gnomes and fairies. And it's very interactive because you get to choose your path. So I had a fantastic time writing it last year, and still available now through my website. And I have future plans of a meadow story next, where we're learning about meadow ecology.
So is this one of those stories where it is choose your own adventure? So could you start at the beginning again and then try a different route and maybe learn different lessons? Or
so the way it's set up, which I will say, I was not the one who set this up in my email service provider, because that was a lot of technical work.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The way it's set up, you cannot go back. So if you want to start the story again, you need to basically buy the story again.
Okay.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, that's really neat. I've never heard of anyone doing a project like that. So people, if they want to sign up, they could go to locustlightfarm.com.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. Right on. Cool. Yeah, I was curious to hear more about that because we were emailing a little bit about that. Can you tell us about your passion for, say, herbal smoke? And that's regarding say incense, smoking herbs and all that.
Yeah, I love smoke. I think that people, everyone has their own medicine, if you will. And I think that there's so much to explore in herbalism. But I think when it comes down to it, there's always going to be maybe one or two things that really are the most poignant medicine for you individually. And I think, for me, that tends to be delicious herbal beverages, and also smoke. There's so many things I love about smoke. I think, smoke is extremely dispersing. And I think that is particularly helpful for people who can have heavy emotions. And I mean that, again, like you said, smoking, it might mean actually smoking herbs in a pipe or in an herbal cigarette. But it also can just simply mean burning herbs in whatever form, loose, rolled up into a bundle or such. I love burning herbs, and, smoking releases the aromatics of the herbs. It's very dispersing. And so that can be beautiful emotional medicine. It can really, it's a nervous system medicine. It can help you focus. It can help you to relax. Yes. Actually, as Althaea was being born, my husband was burning rosemary. Rosemary is one of my favorite. It's probably my favorite herb to burn. And I think for me, it's just something that's very calming. It's very comforting. I also think that all of us have one or two primary senses, And smell and taste are definitely my primary senses. And, I just can't get enough of the smell of herbal smoke. I feel personally that like interacting with herbs in the form of smoke is a way of like interacting with them in their elder form. So if you think about, in like the pagan world, we say like maiden, mother, crone, or, youth, parent, elder, if you will. And I think that in interacting with herbs in the smoke form is interacting with them really in their elder form. And so I think that it just gives you that sense of comfort and belonging and wisdom, that an elder can bring. And then I just use smoke practically too. I think smoke is like, it's literally cleansing, so I will use smoke to cleanse things that have like mildew, or if something has a fragrance, like I bought my molcajete from a Mexican grocer, and it was a very small store that was filled with that fragrance, that like just classic Central and South American fragrance of that specific type of laundry detergent. Which like, if you know it in your head right now, there's a very specific laundry detergent fragrance, and the molcajete like had that fragrance in it. And I'm like, I can't like grind herbs with something that has this, because it's the volcanic rock. And so it's very porous. And so for days I soaked it in baking soda paste, and then I would put vinegar on it. I'd put it in the sun, and just nothing was helping. Then finally I was like, I've got to use smoke to cleanse this. And so I probably used like rosemary and maybe just a little bit of white sage to like just cleanse it. And that was what finally did it. Yeah, I really love smoke.
Yeah, not smoke, but smell is so tied to memory and everything, and emotion. I would say Amanda came back from some sort of hair appointment the other day, and it made her hair smell very. It made me feel like it. It was a very bizarre feeling. She smelled so differently than what she usually does that it was hard for me to like. I had to like recalibrate and like re-relate to her, be like, okay, this is still Amanda, and it's all. Yeah. It's a very powerful thing. Where if you smell something that you remember from when you were a kid or whatever, it could have very profound emotional, effects on you. So as far as like burning the rosemary, does that mean you're just drying like sprigs of the leaves and then tying them together and then lighting it? Is that what you're doing there?
Sometimes, yeah. Okay. Or also, so sometimes I do that. Like I'll make little bundles. Yeah. But rosemary itself is actually very easy. You could just dry an individual sprig.
Okay.
Burn that.
Somehow I've never done that. I gotta give that a go.
Oh, it's great. So usually when I have like my work from home space set up, and I often have like a little work from home altar, which by the way, cake stands are great for mini altars.
Good tip.
Yes. So I have a particular like mini cake stand that's very cute. It has little hearts in it. And then usually, we have a new kitten. So right now my desk.
Yeah, I saw him circling the room.
Yeah. Oh no, that's our big cat. That's Bridget.
Oh, okay.
The kitten is locked out of the room for this interview because he just wreaks havoc. But so I'll usually have like a very simple little work from home altar, and one thing I'll keep is like a sprig of dried rosemary and a candle. And when the rosemary is not in a bundle, how the leaves basically kind of will form a square on the stem, and so it's very easy to just light, and then it will, if you just light it and blow it out, and just the perfect small amount of smoke will come, and you can move it around. It's very beautiful the way the smoke comes off the leaves as they're smoldering. And then it will just go out by itself. And that's your little break. And then when you need to focus again, when you need a little distraction, you just light your little sprig of rosemary again. It's very nice.
Love that. Are you still offering that ritual and smoke class, or is that kind of like a once a year type of thing?
I will say that I have archived that class, but if someone were to email me, what beautiful. If someone were to ask for it, it still exists, but I have for the most part archived it.
Right on. Again, that's locustlightfarm.com. Yeah, definitely sign up for Amanda's newsletter. I always love reading them and getting your updates about everything. So right on. Well, if I were to say, what's your spirit plant? Would anything come to mind?
I would probably say clary sage. I think
Why is that?
if there was a trifecta, it would be clary sage, nettle, and rosemary.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give you 3 choices.
Yeah, if I was like, I guess if I had to, I would say I would be like maybe I'd be like a rosemary sun and like a clary sage rising and a nettle moon. If we were to put it into astrology terms.
I love it.
Clary sage, I think, or at least I like aspire to be a clary sage. Clary sage is like so magical. I feel like clary sage is like the fairy apartment complex. Like all the fairies can just hang out there and sip the nectar and play. And in clary sage, like it peels back the veil, so it just helps you to see more clearly and see things that maybe you wouldn't have seen otherwise. And I think helps you connect with your second sight and your intuition. It clears away the fogginess when you're trying to access your own wisdom or literally just see. I will say the first time I saw American ginseng in the wild, actually, I had sprayed my eyes with clary sage hydrosol before going botanizing. And I'm not
on accident, right? Was it on accident?
No, I did it on purpose. I thought,
Okay.
I thought I'm going botanizing today. I don't want the fairies to be able to hide anything from me. So I sprayed it. And I ended up finding a small population of American ginseng, which was shocking, really, and magical.
So the intent of that was to get your botanizing eyes on. You were trying to see through the veil, I guess, if you will.
Yeah. So clary sage has a traditional use, or you could say folkloric use, but traditional use that if you kind of apply clary sage to your eyes, the fairies cannot cast a glamour over any, like they can't, the fairies can't confuse you. So if you imagine like back in Europe when there's this idea that the fairies could cast a glamour and confuse you and you could just wander off into fairyland and be lost forever. Yeah. Clary sage was sort of the antidote for that.
Right on. Yeah, when I was in Columbine School of Botanical Studies, we were doing this exercise where we would. Do you know the Calypso orchid?
No.
So, you have to look up the Calypso orchid. Maybe I'll try to figure out how to edit a picture of it on the replay of this. But it's absolutely beautiful. And one of our exercises in Columbine School was we were supposed to stand there when it was in full bloom and kind of count how many we could see. And everyone else in class could see like 50 of them. And I think I saw like 3. And then it occurred to me, probably because I'm colorblind, but I was like, maybe I should spray some clary sage on my eyeballs.
Yes. I wonder.
Maybe that's all I need.
Yeah.
But what are some of your current, say, plant allies like that's helping you out, like say with your health or just your general lifestyle?
I would say Go-To Cola is a big ally for me. I think just for mental health, and also I think for a lot of herbalists you have sort of like herbs that are part of your preventative, what I call preventative well care, based on maybe health patterns in your family. So for me, I'm always very focused on heart health and brain health.
Yeah.
So just as part of my regular retinue, hawthorn, Go-To Cola, rosemary, always in the mix somehow.
Sure.
I think for me, like mimosa bark can be really helpful. And of course, I'm still breastfeeding Althaea, so nettle, raspberry leaf, alfalfa, just like building back my mineral stores and calcium stores, and just trying to make sure I'm nourished. Sure.
Have you ever heard of fenugreek for like breastfeeding?
Yes. Yeah. So I took fenugreek in capsules, and I also John and I have Indian like in-laws.
Okay.
And so I know I wish we had a word for that in English, but so my Indian mother-in-law
okay,
made me oh my goodness, what were they called? Methi ladus. I think they're called methi ladu, I think. someone can correct me in the comments if that's wrong. But basically, like, imagine like a golf ball size, something that almost seems like a candy because it's very sweet, of like fenugreek and other herbs. And you eat one a day, and that's like a traditional kind of Indian fenugreek food for breastfeeding and postpartum. So I had those to eat, and then I took fenugreek capsules also, and then I was having blessed thistle in my nettle, etc. infusions.
Right on. Yeah, I remember that being pretty seemingly effective when my daughter Amelia was born. Also, pro tip: fenugreek seeds make great sprouting seeds. I've sprouted those quite a bit, and they're actually really tasty too. They kind of got like a maple syrup flavor almost randomly. But
fake maple syrup flavor is made from fenugreek.
Really? That does not surprise me.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't know that. Sweet. Well, a few more questions for you, Amanda. What's something non-herbal related that you like, one of your hobbies?
I love reading fiction a lot, and I love cozy mysteries, which for those of you who don't know, I stumbled accidentally upon cozy mysteries. It's a genre of mysteries where there's always some sort of coziness backdrop. And of course, you said not herbal related, but like my favorite is a series called the China Bales series, where the protagonist owns an herb shop, but the protagonist might also own a coffee shop or a tea shop. I read all like the herbal and beverage related ones. So I love cozy mysteries. I love reading. I think most of what I do is related to herbalism in some way. I do crossword puzzles. I like crossword puzzles.
Really? Okay. I do those with my daughter as well. I love doing crossword puzzles.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm curious. What's your fascination with beverages? I feel like you brought that up 3 different times today. What's going on there?
I just love things that are delicious, and so I just like drinking things that are delicious, and I think that deliciousness is a great vehicle for wellness, or like I say, preventative well care and herbs. So, whether that might mean like, herbal infusions that you make sure taste good, yummy herbal mocktails, I love coffee, and there's like a whole range of things that can go under the umbrella of coffee. Delicious iced teas. We do a lot of reishi chai in our house, and the reishi chai can be like a nice cozy decoction in winter. It can be yummy iced reishi chai with oat milk in the summer, So I guess I just feel like, I think that like learning and I guess like health, can be fun and delicious. And so in terms of learning, I think that learning through fiction and learning through stories is great. And then in terms of like learning herbs, I think, I really love like having an emphasis on our senses when teaching. And I think, I just like to emphasize deliciousness. And I'm like what I think of as like a treat driven human. I'm always looking for like all day, I'm just looking for the next treat. And so making those treats things that also contain herbs and are just like nourishing you and, or supporting your nervous system. And, I think there can easily be a lot of overlap with deliciousness and herbal well care.
Totally agree. Yeah, I love cooking, and anytime we could infuse herbs into anything we're doing, it's for the better. And I'll say Althaea is one lucky kiddo because she'll be growing up with all sorts of tasty treats nonstop, and they'll probably be medicinal in some way. So, let's a couple more questions. Let's do do you want to do a Let's Get Deep Friends Edition random question? All right. Here we go.
I love this.
I know we're very random here at HerbRally. So, oops. What is something now considered outdated that you wish would come back?
Letter writing. I love writing letters. So I guess I still write letters. So to me, it's outdated. But I really enjoy letter writing.
Now, I remember you used to have some sort of advice column or something that you'd mail out to people, like some sort of letters from a witch or something like that. Do you still do that?
I don't. So I ended up pausing that in October. So Althea was born in November. So the Samhain letter was the last letter in October, just because I knew that I wouldn't quite have the bandwidth to do that. I worked on those with a friend who was the calligrapher and artist, and really, I would write the letters and write, all the components. And my friend would just artistically create them. So we have shelved that temporarily and would like to work on publishing that as somewhat of a coffee table book.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that's off to the side burner. I will say, because I really like Easter eggs, even though my creative work is still really tiny. So that letter, in that people would get like a letter every month, and then maybe like a poem and a recipe, but also newspaper clippings from a fake newspaper. Yeah. So the newspaper clippings, the fake newspaper was from a fake town called Mulberry Meadows. The forest story is set on the outskirts of Mulberry Meadows.
Ah, okay. So you're bringing it back.
Yeah. So all the characters, most of the characters who appear, most of the human characters who appear in the forest story appeared in the Mulberry Meadows Gazette in classified ads and things like that. Yeah, so that actually, I started writing the letters because this was a few years ago. I was just complaining to a friend about Instagram and how I didn't like having to manage an Instagram account, because I was saying like having an Instagram account is kind of like being the editor of a magazine, because there's so many different modalities within Instagram and they all take different types of cleverness, and that's a lot to keep up with. And then basically the way you successfully do Instagram content, to me, feels like you're running a magazine. Yeah. And I said, I never wanted to be an editor of a magazine. I just really like writing letters. And so that's why I've decided to focus more on writing emails. And my friend said, well, why don't you just like actually write letters then to people? Yeah. And so that got that idea started as sort of like my antidote to internet communication.
Sure. Yeah. I really love your newsletters. So yeah, again, dear listener, go sign up for Locust Light Herb Farm newsletters. Part of the game is I gotta answer the question as well. And the funny thing is, I randomly started becoming infatuated with collecting cassettes and records again.
Ooh.
So like I'm looking over here and there's like this vintage stereo that I kind of put together when we were doing our whole moving transition from Oregon to Wisconsin, and I absolutely love it. So yeah, we have a few records, and it's just kind of nice to like intentionally listen to a full album as opposed to just say Spotify. And maybe it's pointless, I have no idea, but it does kind of bring back that like nostalgic feel of my childhood of listening to cassettes, listening to records and all that. So that's my answer. Although it says that you wish would come back, I guess records kind of are making a comeback regardless. So but yeah, right on. Well, one more question before where we learn more about where to find more about you and everything. But what's your favorite part about being an herbalist, and what's your big why that keeps you learning and growing?
My favorite part about being an herbalist, for sure. Well, okay. The first thing I was going to say is that there's always more to learn. And so, like there's always something new to delve into, whether it's a school of herbalism or an aspect. So like, for instance, the next thing I really want to delve into more is phytochemistry. Phytochemistry is exciting. But then, you could study a different school of herbalism, or you could get into something like botanical drawing, or you could go deeper into mushrooms instead of plants, So, and there's so many different ways to be an herbalist. Like, so some people have more of a background from more of like a human health background, whereas I have more of a farming and growing background. And so I think, there's always more to learn. So I think, and I love that, and I understand how that can be overwhelming, but for me, I think, well, there's always something more to learn, and you can always learn from new teachers. And so that's fun. I mean, the other obvious thing is, again, my goal is always just to be outside. And so working with plants is an outdoor activity. And that's the other big draw for me.
What's one more question on top of that. I kind of feel like I know the answer, but why should we be outside as much as we can?
Well,
that's kind of a big question.
But. Yeah, I think I would say like there really are no shoulds, right? So I'm not going to tell someone else that they have to be outside.
Touche.
For me, I think I just really grew up outside, and I love experiencing textures, right? So I like being out in a wide variety of weather conditions, and I like when it's not necessarily an option. I like when you have to be outside, when it's still dewy, when it's too hot, when it's too cold, when it's raining, when you're getting muddy, when you're gritty, now it's hailing. You know, I just like being outside in so many textures. Of course, being outside like has many benefits for your nervous system and your health and all of that. But I think ultimately we like you were saying, we're happiest when we do the things we want to do.
Yeah.
And I think for me, like, I just try and really be honest with myself. Like, I don't do like with like herbalism and cooking and eating. I always feel very lucky that my husband and I love to cook, and we love plants and we love vegetables. That's why we do it. We don't, you know what I mean? Like we don't, we do it because we're interested in that, and we're interested in learning about health. And we're interested in learning about how bodies work and all of that. And I just feel grateful ultimately that that's something that we're interested in, because I think we're always actually just pursuing the things we're curious about and what's pulling our curiosity. And so I think for me, again, like being outside, there's nooks, there's crannies, there's moss, there's tree knots, you know, there's like so much to activate your imagination. There's so much to be curious about and explore. So that's why I like being outside.
Great answer. Yeah, I love that. Well, right on. Where should we brought it up a few times? So where should we send people to go directly to your Instagram account and follow you right there, or no? Because you don't do anything. My Instagram
account is I would say it's
defunct.
Archived. Yeah, it's defunct. So I would say going to my website and then signing up for my emails. So my emails are the best place to learn about me and what's going on. You know, I do turn my emails into blog posts, so you can go back and read.
Oh, cool.
You know, the ones that work as blog posts.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly active on my Instagram. I have had a YouTube channel.
That's right. I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, so that I haven't added anything to for a while. But if you, for instance, if someone wanted to hear in more detail the story about the start of Locust Light, that's there. But yeah, I really focus on making my email newsletter fun and engaging. So I would say that's the best place to learn more about me.
Sweet. All right. Well, we'll leave links to those in the show notes. And thank you so much for your time today, Amanda. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you, Mason. And thanks for having Althaea here too. I appreciate that.
That's right. Thank you so much, Althaea, for joining us on the HerbRally podcast. Really appreciate it. So we'll see y'all in the next episode. And yeah, thank you so much and take care.
Right.
Bye. Hey everyone, this is Mason with HerbRally. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and also go ahead and subscribe. We come out with new herbal content each and every week. If you didn't know, HerbRally also lists herbalism events. We list herbalism events chronologically. We list them also by state. So you can just go ahead and search by Oregon or Wisconsin or wherever you live. You can find out what herbalism events are happening in your neck of the woods. We also list herbalism events, virtual herbal events. So if you can't make it to an in-person conference or plant walk, we list lots of virtual events as well. To find out more, you could go to herbrally.com/events or herbrally.com/virtual. But if you can help it, I would highly recommend trying to go to an herbalism conference. Those are some of the best learning experiences I've ever had, and that's where you can find different herbal teachers, and then maybe you could perhaps take their apprenticeship. But yeah, just do what you can. Get out there and learn about the herbs, you know, like yarrow, dandelion, corn, you know, all the above, like all the medicinal herbs. And we'll see you out there. Hope to see you at an herb conference. All right, bye. And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the HerbRally podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us here at HerbRally, we now have a text message community, believe it or not. Basically, it's just updates from us. We send about 1 to 7 texts per week, notifying you about new events, videos, courses, podcasts. You get the idea. It's pretty much like our email newsletter, just in text form. So if you'd like to receive text messages from HerbRally, just text JOIN, that's JOIN, to the number 541-256-2895. Again, that's JOIN to number 541-256-2895. And to stop receiving texts, that's easy too. Just text STOP to the same number. It'll opt you out immediately. Okay, thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your day.